For as long as I can remember being more on the side of a hardcore Star Wars fan, I've been obsessed with timelines, dates, events, and galactic maps. So when the Bad Batch was announced and it was revealed would take place beyond the events of the Clone Wars, I got excited at the prospect of seeing the early years of the Galactic Empire, one which is not often explored. However, I was met with lots of confusion as we got to the end of Season 1, and my venture into Wikipedia told me that the Kamino incident happened in 19 BBY. Wait, 19 BBY? The same year as the creation of Darth Vader and the fall of the Jedi Order? To me, that just doesn't sound right. Join along as I discuss what I think the timeline of the Bad Batch is, or rather should be. Spoilers ahead. I highly recommend checking out the Star Wars Timelines book as well. It has some great entries that really help shape the events of the Star Wars universe. This is by no means a critique of the encyclopedia, just my own interpretations of the timeline. I also want to stress that the way I think of time passing in this show is somewhat vague. I'll say this and that were about a month apart, or this and that were a couple days apart. It won't be getting into exact numbers, just sort of estimations. This video will also be covering just the first season of The Bad Batch. I'll have 2 more videos covering the following seasons in the near future. The Bad Batch premiere takes place right when Order 66 comes down, which is 19 BBY. How far into 19 BBY though? Considering how seasons 5, 6, and 7 of the Clone Wars and Revenge of the Sith all take place in 19 BBY, I'd figure we're a little over halfway through the year. As an earthly comparison, I think we're in the July to August region of 19 BBY. I think it's fair to assume that Maul's takeover of Mandalore, Ahsoka leaving the Jedi Order, the Outer Rim sieges, and the execution of Order 66 can cover that span of time up to this point. So the Batch escape Kamino, go on the run, eventually meet up with Sid, and take mercenary jobs for her. I think the run from episode 1 to episode 5 are all over the course of a couple weeks, as episodes 1 through 3 all happen within a couple days of one another, which is weird since Warmantle is already happening. Episode 4 is probably a week later when they start to run out of rations and encounter Fennec Shand, and after that they go to meet Sid for information about Fennec, also starting their work as mercenaries. Seems like a reasonable couple of weeks to me. The Batch's mission to Corellia happens a short time later, since Omega is still struggling with the bow. I'd guess that Battle Scars, Reunion, and Bounty Lost take place a week or so later, since the Martez sisters relay the Batch's position to Rex, and he likely didn't show up right away. Common Ground seems like it's right after Bounty Lost, as Tech reminds Omega of the bounty hunters pursuing her, so they likely haven't had any missions since, as well as Hunter having her stay behind for Omega's safety. Here's where things get interesting. Devil's Deal and Rescue on Ryloth, I believe, take place a couple months later, as the Imperial refinery on Ryloth nears its completion. Now, I know the Empire works quick when it comes to establishing its operations, especially since the groundwork was laid in the Clone Wars for most of these operations, but the refinery isn't one of those things. This is an Imperial construct with the permission of Ryloth's leading figures, and the sheer scale of this refinery would take time to establish. Then there's Captain Hauser, who along with some members of his squad had their inhibitor chip effects wear off, which certainly couldn't have started to happen in the weeks after Order 66, at least from my understanding of how they work. There's also Crosshair, which if he was cleared for active duty months after being stranded on Kamino, surely he would have had to take some time off to heal after his intense burns from Bracca. This also gives Crosshair some time to remove his inhibitor chip as well, which I wish we saw, since I didn't believe him at the time, still kinda don't. Anyway, the Batch rescue the Syndulla family and part ways, with Crosshair being permitted to hunt his former squad. Infested is one that isn't really consequential to the timeline. It could be a few days or weeks after the Ryloth duology. Where things get really interesting is Warmantle. Now, with my idea of how much time it took for the Ryloth refinery to be built, I can also apply this thought to the TK training facility on Darrow. I do not believe this was a facility constructed during the Republic, as you would think Tech would have knowledge of its existence, but he doesn't. This facility is another one I'd apply a few months to, and since it's concerning Project Warmantle, Admiral Rampart is involved. He must have an incredible ability to juggle responsibilities. I envy him. If the facility was being worked on the same time as the refinery, then it probably took a month or so longer to create. Anyway, the Batch are asked by Rex to infiltrate the base, they rescue Commando Gregor and escape, however Hunter is captured, and Crosshair takes him away. If you're keeping track of this super vague estimation of time passage, I'd assume we're into the first quarter of 18 BBY. Hunter's capture and the return to Kamino along with its subsequent destruction all clearly happen within probably hours of one another, so that's easy to figure out. Now there's some key information presented in the second season I'll bring up now. When Admiral Rampart is exposed for being the cause of Kamino's fall, Senator Chuchi brings up how funds were being diverted from the Kaminoan contracts months prior to the destruction. I think this lines up with the idea that it took several months to complete Darrow's training facility and Rylos refinery, as Rampart would probably have been diverting those funds to his outside projects. When Project Warmantle begins, the Empire hadn't cancelled all of its contracts with the Kaminoans, as Tarkin tells Rampart that the cloning facilities of Kamino will continue to serve their purpose. So the cloning facilities remained fully operational for a few months, then Rampart began diverting the funds for a few more, then the Cataclysm begins. And that's part 1 of my Bad Batch timeline theorizing. Do you agree? Do you think the events of Season 1 all happen within a very short time frame of one another? Or is it even more spread out than I thought? Let me know in the comments. I'll be picking this back up with Season 2 and my thoughts on its timeline, which I'm very excited about. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed, as always, be sure to leave a like, comment, subscribe, share, tap that notification bell, all the fixes. Take care, stay awesome, and may the Force be with you.